Choosing a podcast host for your podcast can be quite the confusing process if you, don't even know where to start. That's why in this video, I'm going to give you 3 recommendations to help you get started with a podcast host solution for your show. Let's get started. I'm Sebastian Rusk, and I help marketers and entrepreneurs start a podcast. Now, you've probably heard of popular podcast hosting solutions and podcast solutions like Buzzsprout or Libsyn or Anchor. I talk about Anchor a lot on this channel because, it's free and it's a turnkey solution. Today, I'm going to give you 3 of my recommendations as far as a podcast host and being able to make sure that, it's not so confusing when figuring out which podcast host to choose. Now, it's important to understand that each podcast host serves the same purpose, and that is for you to upload your podcast episode, have them host it, and then distribute it to all the listening and streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify and Pandora and Google Podcasts, etc., etc. All right, let's get down to the first recommendation. Here we go. Now, a podcast host should have some basic functionality and features that you most definitely need for your podcast. The first one being, is it easy to use? Can you upload a file with ease without wanting to pull your hair out? Number 2, do they provide you with a podcast website? You're hosting your podcast with them. Most podcast hosts, good ones at least, provide you with a podcast website that will show information about your show as well as being able to subscribe and listen to all of the episodes. You can register a domain name and forward it right to your podcast host website that they provide you. Very, very important. Now, some podcast hosts even have an affiliate program. So people say, hey, I want to start a podcast, and where do you host your podcast? You can send them with your affiliate link, and they send you an Amazon card or something fun like that. Hey, why not? But those basic functionalities are what you're looking for with a podcast host. First recommendation, probably the industry leader in podcast hosting, is Libsyn. Libsyn is probably one of the first players on the block as far as podcast hosting is concerned. They most definitely give you a podcast website. They help you out with distribution to iTunes and Spotify and the other distribution platforms. And they are really an industry leader within the podcast host space. My next recommendation would be Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout, very comparable to Libsyn, does provide you with a podcast website, offers distribution, integration, making sure your show gets out to all of the listening platforms available. And they also have other neat little marketing tools like creating audiograms and marketing collateral for you to be able to market each and every episode. My last recommendation is a podcast host that we currently use for the Beyond the Story podcast, which is Simplecast. And I went with Simplecast for one reason. They provided all the distribution that I needed. It was extremely easy to use, extremely affordable to use, runs about $15 a month for their basic account, and they give you a podcast website that looks very modern, and you can customize it, and it looks clean and attractive. People can navigate easily around, being able to listen to episodes or subscribe to your show, and that's extremely important to me. So Simplecast.com for my third and final recommendation for podcast host. Now, it doesn't matter which podcast host you decide, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Simplecast, you choose one on your own. I would just make sure that you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges when choosing a podcast host. If you find some other podcast host that you may want to use, make sure you're comparing it to the features that are in Libsyn and the features that are in Buzzsprout and also in Simplecast. All the links to Libsyn, Buzzsprout, and Simplecast will be provided below in the description for you to be able to visit and find out what features are available. They list them all on their website and make it real easy for you to decide which one is going to be the best solution for you. Now, I must disclose, none of these platforms are needed if you're just getting started. You want to start out with the basics and you want to keep your costs minimal. Free is a great price when you're doing that. And Anchor.fm is a free platform. So they allow you to upload your podcast, record your podcast, edit your podcast, share your podcast, all the above from an app on your phone or from their desktop, and they don't charge you a penny. So if you're looking for a free solution, Anchor is always coming in strong with an affordable way to start a podcast today from your phone. Doesn't matter which podcast host you choose, just make sure it's a reputable one and make sure that it does allow you to get your show out and distribute it to as many listening platforms as possible. Well, I hope you're leaving this video being a little more confident about choosing a podcast host, or at least knowing one or two things that you didn't know about choosing a podcast host. If you got any questions about podcast hosts or podcasting in general, or any content on this channel, please leave a comment below. I do respond to each and every one of you lovely people. It is my distinct pleasure. I'm Sebastian Rusk, signing off from the Podcast Launch Lab YouTube studio. Until next time.